So welcome. This was supposed to be a panel. You'll notice that the rest of them ghosted me. No, they couldn't come, and unfortunately, the technology does not allow us to have a virtual panel. So they trust me to do the presentation. So don't beat me up too much. So the topic here is talking about Anuket, the Anuket project, what it is, what it's supposed to be, and it's how I've been working on it for a number of years, and I'm pretty excited about it. And I'm here to get more interest, make sure that everybody knows what it is and why it's important to the LFN infrastructure or ecosystem, because it is infrastructure. So it's not a very big group, so I actually welcome questions along the way. So otherwise, I could just keep talking. But feel free if you have a question, just say, shout it out. So Anuket is was here. Let me talk about the agenda. So we're going to talk about what is Anuket. How many people actually know a little bit or have heard the name Anuket? Very good. I know, Dave, you don't count. And how many of you are, I wouldn't say actively participating, because I don't think anybody here is. Oh, yes, actually, you're right. There is one person who's actively participating. How many people are Anuket curious? Okay, you're all here, so you must be Anuket curious. So I'm going to talk about what it is, why it's important to the telecom ecosystem, and then I'm also going to talk about the Anuket Assured and Conformance program, and I have a little bit of an announcement for that one too, and then what's next. So moving on, the virtual panel, you can see I'm the only one. So I'm actually the Anuket Technical Steering Committee co-chair along with Gergeely and from Nokia. And so one of the nice things about Anuket is it's made up of a community of both vendors and telco operators. So we really actually work together to work out the infrastructure requirements to support VNFs and CNFs. So here's the problem statement. So there's a whole lot of telcos have a lot of need for infrastructure. We are all moving toward the cloud. We still have some fair amount of physical infrastructure out there, appliances, etc. But increasingly, we're moving toward the cloud. A lot of telcos are on OpenStack, and there's a lot of pressure for the telcos to move to Kubernetes. Can I have a little show of hand of how many people in the audience have developed some applications in Kubernetes? Good, for telco uses? Yeah, some, yeah. We find it's a mix. We have some, in our infrastructure, we have some Kubernetes, but I would say we still rely on a lot of VMs because, of course, we don't write our own routing software. We don't write our own SD-WAN software. We rely on vendors for that, and very few of them have actually ported any of their software over to Kubernetes yet. Yet, that's the operative word. And one of the things that's holding them back is that there was no standard infrastructure. Every single telco had their own thing going. That's frustrating for vendors. It's also frustrating for the telcos too, because it's actually more expensive for us, because if we go to one of the vendors and say, hey, you build our infrastructure for us, and here's our requirements, they go, oh, yeah, well, we have to write a whole bunch of non-standard code. I was involved in one of the first edge computing software for the telco, our virtual network services product. It's a standard white box. We ended up writing most of the orchestration code and most of the supporting code, and sticking it all together because there was literally, we could not buy it. And this was a couple of years ago. Now, there's more and more, I just heard, I just went to the Dent presentation. I was like, wait, that looks really familiar. Just went to the Sonic presentation. I was like, wow, that looks familiar too. So I think there's a lot of interest in the community to really, come together and build some more standards. But you need to have infrastructure underneath to support all these standard applications. So that is our project. And this is, so it's primarily, it's an interesting project because most LF projects are code-oriented, and Anuket has some code, mostly in the test side, but it's primarily a reference model and a reference architecture. So there's a lot of documentation, a lot of requirements, and what code we do have is testing code. So you can stand up your infrastructure and then you can test to make sure that it meets the requirements. So that's a little bit different than a lot of the other projects. As I mentioned, we already have active vendor and operator support. I'd say it's about 50-50. I know a couple of people in the room are active in it. We are looking to build more community support using more uptake in the community, and I'll talk about the Anuket badge, Anuket Assured badging program. We're hoping to build more support in the community, both on the vendor and the operator side. And the other interesting thing about Anuket is that we are actually extended to we're connected to other standards bodies. So we support the GSMA. We actually, we're the pipeline for the GSMA reference model and reference architectures. So any questions so far before I move on? Yes? Yes, we are, yeah. Open RAN, TM Forum, MEF, and GSMA. I'm not involved in that part, so I don't really know much, but I do know Verizon's involved in Open RAN and in ORAN in some way. So, but Anuket, I think right now I would say it's just tentative, but we probably should look into it more. Yeah. So this is, we have currently 2 releases a year. We're working on the Nile release, which is coming up in a couple weeks. And as I said, we are really looking to advance the traction of support within the community. We are having, I'm here to recruit, so, because we do have resource restraints. The project is about 4 years old now. And, we've had pretty good support, and every time we talk to the telcos and the operators, they're like, yeah, this sounds really, really good. But, then, we get down to the people who actually do the work. So that's what I'm encouraging more support here. So what is unique about Anuket? When we started the project, we looked around and, ONAP was working on the orchestration, and there was a whole bunch of work around VNFs and CNFs and, standard applications that run on the cloud. What was missing was that spot at the bottom over here. There was no standard idea of what constituted the infrastructure. Now, many telco operators at the time, and again, this is 4 years ago, had standardized on OpenStack, and that's still true. There's a lot of OpenStack out there. And we were getting a lot of pressure from the community, particularly the vendors, to go into CNFs and Kubernetes and containers. And we didn't really have, there were gaps. We didn't really have a way forward at the time. So we really saw that as our mission to really help facilitate that. So how it works, we have work streams. We have partners, as I mentioned, so CNCF, we work very closely with the CNCF, GSMA, ETSI, ONAP, of course, within the LFN community. I think NIFO, I think we're going to be starting to work with them more closely, and Silva possibly. So, you know, we really see ourselves as sort of the underlying thing that supports all the other things that are going on above. So we have a reference model here, and the reference model feeds into the GSMA reference models. So we create it, it gets brought over to the GSMA, and the GSMA then either tweaks it or usually just takes it as is. And then we have reference architectures. We currently have two. One is quite mature, that's the OpenStack one. And then we have the Kubernetes one, which is moving right along, actually. I haven't been involved in it, so I don't know as much about how far along it is in maturity. But I know that there's a lot of active work going on in that one. And then, so these are mostly the documentation and reference. Yes? Yes, it is. Yeah. We use that as it's literally the definition that we used in the documentation. We actually just have a link to the CNF documentation. So then we have reference implementations, and we actually just stood up a reference implementation last week in the UNH lab for the OpenStack one. And it's actually being tested right now. So we should be having a Anuket Assured badged version that can be tested in the lab as of probably in another week or two. And then that includes, installers and other CI/CD and the other tools that are needed to support the implementation. And then we have the conformance, which is what we're testing. So we have a number of test functions. We have func test, bindperf, a number of other testing tools that we use to make sure that these infrastructures do support what they're supposed to support. So any questions? Yes. We can. I believe we're building those now. Yes, func test is being expanded to include CNFs. So right now, it started as a VNF only, but it's being expanded. So, yes. Yeah. Yes, correct. So the development process is, we started with the reference model over here. And then we have kind of worked down. So the reference model at this point is pretty mature. We add additional features and tweaks as the technology matures, but it hasn't changed a huge amount. And then the reference architectures, of course, we have the OpenStack, and then we have the Kubernetes one. OpenStack one is relatively mature at this point. The Kubernetes one is still definitely being heavily worked on, and then going into the reference implementations. So this is the process. So we have a governance process. We have, so here's the CNCF over here, in case you're wondering. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're always relying on as much other work as possible. We're really, I view the whole project as kind of filling in the gaps to create an infrastructure that can support all of these other workloads. These are typical project outputs. Again, as I mentioned, it's mostly test suites and documentation, requirements documentations. Last time I checked, I think we have at least 300 or 400 pages of documentation. It's quite substantial. And we have quite a few test suites as well. The community itself is organized. We have the Anuket TSC, which is, the technical steering committee. Obviously, we're responsible for an overview of, what's going on, making sure the releases get out. And then we have the work streams and the PTLs under the work streams. So again, it's a pretty standard LF for any open source project. And again, I think what's a little bit unique is we do actually work heavily with, here's GSMA over here, here's a CNCF, here's the members, and here we also, tie into the LF and infrastructure as well. So what's in it for you? For the network operators, it's reduced complexity. As one of my coworkers said to me, he said, if we can adopt this across the network, across Verizon, and it saves us 10% of our testing that we need to do to certify an infrastructure, it's well worth it for us. It will save us millions of dollars. And so that's reduced. It limits the, if we can reduce the number of platforms that we have to support, that's all the better for us. For the vendors, it means that you don't have to create a test suite and a unique infrastructure for every single one of your customers, because all your customers are very large, and they all have their unique thing. But if we all buy into this platform, it's not a business. It's not something we're competing on. None of our customers are saying, "Wow, do you have, are you running on OpenStack? Or are you running on VMware? Are you running?" They don't give a crap. They just want their network services. So it behooves us as a telecom and vendor community to work on this together, because it saves everybody a whole lot of headaches. So that's the infrastructure piece. There's also the network function vendors or the cloud native function vendors. Again, it means that you do not have to, it reduces your testing intervals, reduces your development costs, because you don't have to do as many platforms. You don't have to develop for as many platforms, because if you develop to this something that meets the requirements here, that's just again cuts your development costs significantly. Reduces your need to support multiple platforms, infrastructure platforms. I'm sure everybody is well aware of the headache of supporting multiple network platforms. And the infrastructure vendors, of course, also same thing. So here are just a few sample companies that have been involved. Some of them are currently observers. This includes observers, supporters, and contributors. But as you can see, the community is, there is definitely interest in the community, and it's global interest. And we have, again, I think it's a true collaboration that really will, it benefits everybody. And I have no idea what the time is, but just a quick, how am I doing on time? Okay. What? Okay, good. So we'll definitely have opportunity to go into, I've been kind of rushing a little bit. I think a really important part of this project is our relationship to the other communities. I think that's a key, because as far as I know, none of the other communities are working on the infrastructure component. Let's face it, infrastructure is boring to a lot of people. Applications is the sexy part. Infrastructure is like, it's just a bunch of racks of stuff and, blinky lights. Hey, I get off on infrastructure, but, a lot of vendors want, the applications and let's say what they think of as the higher value things. So I'd say there's rather little support for it outside of, the Open Infra Foundation, of course, which supports OpenStack and other infrastructure, and which, by the way, was a very early supporter of this project. And but as you can see, we are working heavily with the other projects. So we have the CVC, which is the compliance within LFN. There's this is the, whoops, wow. Let's see, go back. Why am I going? I'm going in the wrong direction. Okay. There we go. Oh, damn. Okay, keep going. Okay, back. So the tug is the CNCF tug. But I do know, I did not go to KubeCon, but I understand Gergeely went to KubeCon, and he was he's very active in that community. So there's a lot of cross pollination across the communities. I'm involved in some MEF work and some OpenStack work as well. So the Anuket Assured program. So this is a program we rolled out, I guess about 8 months ago, 6-8 months ago. The idea is that there's 3 components. There's infrastructure, workload, and lab. So the idea is that various companies in the ecosystem can test their products or services against these tests. It's just a set of test suites, of course, and using the Anuket and the ONAP components to make sure that they're compliant, and then we give them a badge. So we have an infrastructure badge, workload badge, which would be for CNFs and VNFs. And then we do not have the Anuket Assured Lab. We never actually rolled that out. It says Q2 of 2022, but that did not happen. So the Assured program works within the LFN infrastructure again. We have the governing board. We have the CVC, the Compliance and Verification Committee, that then feeds into the projects. It's kind of a bi-directional thing. And then so the CVC works with the projects and then issues the badges. So Anuket, ONAP are the 2 that have badges at this point. So that's it. Oh, actually, I guess this Cloud Native, the CNCF has a set as well for Kubernetes, if the workloads support Kubernetes or can be supported on Kubernetes. So what is the benefits of the Anuket Assured program? Again, as one of my coworkers said, if we save 10% on the amount of testing we have to do, all the better for everybody. So it reduces costs, it increases time to deploy network services. As a telco, I can tell you we are under increasing pressure to get services out faster. Telcos are traditionally very slow, partially because everybody expects your cell phone to work all the time, which means that we have to make sure that it works all the time, which involves a lot of testing and a lot of architectures that reduce the single points of failure, hopefully to 0. And so, if we can accelerate our delivery of our services, that's, as I said, a benefit to everybody. Reduces in-house testing, I already mentioned that. And then, of course, the open ecosystem of having the testing. If you can say, hey, I'm a vendor, I've already tested it against these test suites and I passed, then the telcos can say, that's great, we'll just go on to the next set of tests that are needed for our systems. Here's how to participate. There's There's a bunch of documentation. These are links, which I think show up on the posted slides. So we have program documentation, participation, instructions, an application form, and then we have a mailing list, Anuket Assured, and these are all the steps. So it's pretty straightforward, actually. And I do know there's a number of vendors that have actually gone through the process successfully. So on Anuket, we have an ambassadors program, which is a program, and I'm an ambassador, Anuket ambassador. I should have worn my my Anuket ambassador T-shirt, but I did not. Which talk to us, and we will be more than happy to help you understand what what Anuket's all about, and also help with how you can contribute. So we have, and this is how to contribute. So we have an Anuket website, we have an Anuket wiki, we have a whole series of mailing lists, and we have, of course, endless meetings. No, we don't have endless meetings. But I think this is a way, if you can participate, this is a way to really build the infrastructure, that foundation that will really, help the entire telco community. And questions? So, I know I've blown you guys away. So, we all ready to sign up? Sure.
So when we try to standardize the interface, like we try to CNF infrastructure, there is always a delicate balance when you don't want to standardize everything, you want to leave some room for thinking, for innovation, for incubation of new technology. How is it addressed in the reference architecture?
Yeah, yes, it would be. Yes, absolutely. So if you think about the way it's organized, it's increasingly abstract. So reference model, or increasingly concrete. So the reference model, there's always only going to be one reference model. But that's very abstract. So, but if you look at the reference architecture, currently we have two. But, let's say, serverless becomes a thing. I know it attempted and then it just didn't go anywhere. But, if serverless becomes a thing for the telco industry, we would create a reference architecture for serverless. So that's the mechanism to add for very large changes. For smaller changes, technology like the addition of DBTK and hardware interfaces and other types of things, that's as we do our releases, we make those changes.
Does the reference architecture include interface definition?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of what makes it all work. So, good. No, great questions. Thank you.
What does Anuket do to solve kind of like the container networking interface mess that Kubernetes and all that tends to compatibility?
That's a great question. And the answer is we've actually been driving the requirements back into the CNCF groups. So that was one of the things that we early recognized. So when the first one we did was the OpenStack one, because OpenStack actually is quite mature. It was already used by the telcos, and its networking actually works, right? For the most part, we can get into some weirdnesses with Neutron, but at the time we started Anuket, which goes back 4 years, that Kubernetes and the container world just did not have a concept of multi-interface networking at all. It was just totally foreign. That has changed, and part of it was because the Anuket requirements, we went back into the Kubernetes community and said, hey, if you're going to support telcos, and they created a tug just for the telcos. And we came back, and I remember having the meeting with them, and this was before Dan got sick. And it was a really weird meeting. It was in Antwerp. And Dan and the guys from Kubernetes were there, or from CNCF were there, and they were going on about, how containers worked and how you do, it's all test-driven development and everything. And we were like, we're from the telcos. We need requirements. We need multi-interfaces, all of this stuff. And it was like, at the time, it was like two ships passing in the night. But that has changed. That has changed. And I think a lot of it is because of the work of the RA2 group in taking it back into the CNCF community. So, I don't know, Ildiko, you went to KubeCon last week, or 2 weeks ago. The question, I was just talking about how the Anuket community has brought the networking requirements back into the Kubernetes and the CNCF community.
Well, when it comes to KubeCon, we did have some telco-focused presentations, but I haven't had a chance, I haven't seen any workshop kind of events where you can tell that, how exactly we do this stuff. There is a connection point at the CNF certification area where there's communication between that group and I believe the relevant expert in Anuket in the reference architecture that is running Kubernetes. So that's where I kind of saw a connection point. But when it comes to KubeCon specifically,
No, I wasn't talking about KubeCon specifically. Yeah. Sorry. No. KubeCon, there was actually a telco work track. Yes, so, which I didn't attend KubeCon, so I don't know. But Gergeely did, so, and he did say that there was definitely discussions. So it's a great question, and I think the answer is more work needs to be done. As always, yes. So any other questions, or have we actually run out of time? Oh, I did it fast. Okay. So if there are no other questions, I'm giving you back 8 minutes. Amazing.